The old bus station in Cedar Ridge looked like it hadn't seen a fresh coat of paint in 20 years. Dust swirled around the cracked concrete platform as the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the small Texas town. Tommy Martinez sat on a wooden bench, his worn cowboy hat pulled low over his eyes, checking his phone for the third time in 5 minutes. His cousin was supposed to be on this bus, and he really needed her help back at the ranch. Tommy wasn't having the best year. Actually, he wasn't having the best decade. The family ranch that his grandfather had built from nothing was slowly falling apart. The cattle were getting sick, the fences had more holes than a piece of Swiss cheese, and the bills kept piling up faster than he could count them. His grandmother kept telling him things would get better, but Tommy was starting to wonder if she was just being kind. He looked down at his boots and noticed another scuff mark. These boots had seen better days, just like everything else in his life. His truck was making strange noises, his bank account was practically empty, and now he was hoping his cousin could help him figure out how to save the ranch that had been in his family for 3 generations. The bus finally pulled up with a loud hiss of brakes and a cloud of diesel smoke. Tommy stood up and dusted off his jeans, preparing to greet his cousin. But as passengers started getting off, he noticed something that made his heart sink. An older woman with a small suitcase, a young man with headphones, a family with 2 kids. But no sign of his cousin anywhere. He was about to call her when he heard someone crying. There, sitting alone on a bench near the vending machines, was a woman who looked like she'd been having an even worse day than he was. She was a bigger woman, probably in her early 30s, with shoulder-length brown hair and clothes that looked like they'd been slept in. Her face was red from crying, and she kept looking at her phone like it might suddenly start working again. Tommy wasn't the kind of man who could just walk away from someone in trouble. His grandmother had raised him better than that. She always told him that real strength wasn't about how much you could lift or how tough you could act. Real strength was about helping people when they needed it most. He walked over slowly, not wanting to scare her. "Excuse me, miss," he said, taking off his hat out of respect. "Are you all right?" The woman looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. She quickly wiped her tears and tried to compose herself. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice cracked as she said it. Tommy could tell she was lying. He'd been around enough herd animals to recognize when someone was just trying to appear strong. "Are you sure? You look like you might need some help?" She stared at him for a long moment, probably wondering if this stranger was safe to talk to. Finally, she sighed and the whole story came pouring out. Her name was Beth, and she'd been traveling with some people she thought were friends. They'd convinced her to come on this cross-country trip, promising adventure and fun. But somewhere along the way, they'd stolen her money and left her stranded here in Cedar Ridge. "They took everything," she said, fresh tears starting to fall. "My purse, my credit cards, even my phone charger. I don't know anyone here, and I don't have any way to get home." Tommy felt his jaw clench. What kind of people would do something like that to someone who trusted them? He'd seen some pretty low things in his life, but abandoning someone in the middle of nowhere was just cruel. "Where's home?" he asked. "Ohio," she said quietly. "But I don't even have enough money for a bus ticket, and my phone is dead, so I can't call anyone." Tommy looked at this woman, sitting alone and scared in a place where she didn't know anybody, and he made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. It wasn't really a decision he thought about carefully. It was more like instinct, the same way he'd jump into a river to save someone who was drowning. "You're coming with me," he said firmly. Beth's eyes went wide with fear. "What? No, I can't. I don't even know you." Tommy realized how that must have sounded. Here was this strange cowboy in dusty clothes telling her she was coming with him. If he were in her position, he'd probably be scared too. "I'm sorry," he said, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. "I didn't mean it like that. I mean, you can't stay here. This station closes at 6, and there's nowhere else in town for someone to spend the night safely. My grandmother and I live on a ranch about 20 minutes from here. You could stay with us until you figure out what to do next." Beth looked at him suspiciously. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Tommy thought about that for a moment. Why was he doing this? He barely had enough money to keep his own family afloat, and now he was offering to help a complete stranger. But when he looked at her sitting there, alone and scared, he knew he couldn't just walk away. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. "And because my grandmother would tan my hide if she found out I left a woman stranded at a bus station." Despite everything, Beth almost smiled at that. "Your grandmother sounds like a tough lady." "She is," Tommy said. "Toughest person I know. She's also the kindest. She'd want me to help you, and she'd want to help you herself." Beth looked around the empty station. The sun was starting to set, and she realized she really didn't have many options. She could try to spend the night here and hope nothing bad happened, or she could trust this stranger who seemed genuine in his offer to help. "How do I know you're not like the people who left me here?" she asked. Tommy understood her fear. "You don't," he said honestly, "but I'm not asking you to trust me completely. I'm just asking you to let me help you get somewhere safe for the night. Tomorrow we can figure out how to get you home." Something in his voice, maybe the way he didn't try to convince her with fancy words or promises, made Beth believe him. He sounded tired and honest, like someone who'd had his own share of hard times. "Okay," she said quietly. "But just for tonight." Tommy nodded and picked up her small suitcase. "My truck's right over here. It's not much to look at, but it'll get us home." As they walked to his beat-up pickup truck, Beth wondered if she was making a terrible mistake. But as Tommy opened the passenger door for her and made sure she was comfortable before starting the engine, she began to think that maybe, just maybe, she'd finally met one of the good guys. The drive to the ranch was quiet at first. Tommy didn't push her to talk, and Beth appreciated that. She stared out the window at the Texas landscape, thinking about how different her life had become in just one day. This morning she'd been on what she thought was a fun trip with friends. Now she was in a truck with a cowboy she'd never met, heading to a ranch she'd never seen. "What's your ranch like?" she finally asked. Tommy was quiet for a moment. "It's seen better days," he said honestly. "But it's home? My grandfather built it from nothing, and my grandmother still lives there. It's not fancy, but it's got good people on it." Beth could hear the love in his voice when he talked about his family, and it made her feel a little safer. Bad people didn't usually talk about their grandmothers with that kind of respect. As they turned down a dirt road marked by a weathered wooden sign, Beth saw the ranch for the first time. It was exactly what she'd expected from a struggling family farm. A modest house with a wraparound porch, a big red barn that needed some repairs, and pastures stretching out toward the horizon. It wasn't glamorous, but it looked like the kind of place where real people lived real lives. Tommy parked the truck and turned to her. "Welcome to the Martinez Ranch," he said. "It's not much, but you're safe here." And for the first time in days, Beth actually believed that she was. The porch light flickered on as Tommy and Beth approached the front door of the ranch house. Before they could even knock, the door swung open to reveal a small, elderly woman with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her eyes were sharp and bright, and despite her age, she moved with the energy of someone half her years. "Tommy mio," she said in a warm voice with just a hint of a Spanish accent. "I was wondering when you'd get back." "And who's this lovely young lady?" Tommy took off his hat and gave his grandmother a kiss on the cheek. "Abuela Rosa, this is Beth. She's had a rough day and needs a place to stay for the night." Rosa looked at Beth with kind eyes that seemed to see right through to her soul. Beth felt a little nervous under the older woman's gaze, but then Rosa smiled and opened her arms. "Come here, Mia," Rosa said, pulling Beth into a warm hug before she could protest. "You look like you need some food and some rest." Tommy, help her with her bag. Beth was surprised by how good it felt to be hugged by someone's grandmother. It had been a long time since anyone had shown her that kind of immediate, unconditional kindness. "I don't want to be any trouble," Beth said quietly. Rosa waved her hand dismissively. "Trouble? Nonsense. This house is too quiet with just me and Tommy. It'll be nice to have another woman around for a change." As they walked inside, Beth looked around the modest living room. The furniture was old but well maintained, and family photos covered nearly every surface. The walls were decorated with handmade quilts and old ranch equipment that had been turned into decorations. It felt like a home where real people lived, not like the perfect houses she'd seen in magazines. "Are you hungry, Mia?" Rosa asked, already heading toward the kitchen. "I made too much soup today, and Tommy never eats enough." Before Beth could answer, her stomach growled loudly. She hadn't eaten since breakfast, and the stress of the day had left her exhausted. "I guess that answers that question," Tommy said with a small smile. It was the first time Beth had seen him smile, and it changed his whole face. Over dinner, Beth found herself relaxing for the first time in days. Rosa was a natural storyteller, sharing tales about the ranch's history and Tommy's childhood adventures. Tommy mostly listened, occasionally adding details or correcting his grandmother's more colorful versions of events. "Tommy was always bringing home strays," Rosa said, ladling more soup into Beth's bowl. "Baby birds, hurt rabbits, even a three-legged dog once. I used to tell him we couldn't save every animal that needed help, but he never listened." Beth glanced at Tommy, who was looking slightly embarrassed. "Sounds like not much has changed," she said softly. After dinner, Rosa showed Beth to a small but comfortable guest room. The bed was covered with another handmade quilt, and clean towels were folded neatly on the dresser. "There's a bathroom right across the hall," Rosa said. "If you need anything during the night, just call out. This old house carries sound pretty well." As Beth settled into the comfortable bed, she could hear Tommy and Rosa talking quietly in the kitchen. She couldn't make out the words, but she could hear the love and concern in their voices. It made her think about her own family back in Ohio, and how worried they must be since she hadn't been able to call them. The next morning, Beth woke up to the smell of coffee and bacon. She found Tommy and Rosa in the kitchen, but this time there were papers spread all over the table. Tommy looked frustrated, and Rosa was patting his shoulder comfortingly. "Good morning," Beth said hesitantly. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." "Not at all," Rosa said quickly, but Tommy started gathering up the papers. "It's nothing," he said, but Beth could see the worry lines around his eyes. Rosa gave Tommy a look that only grandmothers can give. "It's not nothing, and there's no shame in having problems. Everyone has them." Tommy sighed and sat back down. "It's just ranch business. Nothing for you to worry about." But Beth had caught a glimpse of the papers before Tommy gathered them up. They looked like bills and bank statements, and she'd seen enough of them in her previous job to recognize financial trouble when she saw it. "I used to work as a bookkeeper," she said carefully, "before I decided to take this trip. If you need help organizing anything, I'd be happy to take a look." Tommy looked at her suspiciously. "Why would you want to help with that?" Beth thought about how to explain it. "Because you helped me when I needed it. And because I'm good with numbers. It's what I do." Rosa set down her coffee cup with a decisive clink. "Tommy, let her help. Pride doesn't pay bills." For the next hour, Beth looked through the ranch's financial records. What she found made her heart sink. The ranch was in worse shape than she'd thought. There were overdue bills, missed payments, and some contracts that didn't look right to her. "When was the last time you applied for any government agricultural programs?" she asked. Tommy shrugged. "I don't know. My dad used to handle all that stuff before he passed. I've been trying to figure it out on my own, but it's like they speak a different language." Beth nodded. She'd heard this story before from other small business owners. The paperwork was complicated, and it was easy to miss opportunities for help. "There are programs that could help you," she said. "Grants for small ranchers, subsidies for certain types of cattle, even loans with better interest rates than what you're paying now." Tommy looked skeptical. "If it was that easy, wouldn't everyone be doing it?" "It's not easy," Beth admitted. "It's a lot of paperwork, and you have to know where to look, but it's possible. I helped several small businesses back home navigate this kind of thing." Rosa leaned forward. "What would you need to help us?" Beth thought about it. "Time, mostly. And internet access to research the programs. It would probably take a few days to get everything sorted out." Tommy was quiet for a long moment. "I can't pay you for that kind of work. I can barely pay the bills I already have." "I didn't ask you to pay me," Beth said. "You gave me a place." to stay when I needed it. Let me give you something back. That afternoon, Beth set up a workspace at the kitchen table with Rosa's old laptop. It was slow and sometimes froze, but it was better than nothing. She started researching agricultural programs and making lists of what paperwork they'd need. To apply, Tommy spent most of the day working around the ranch, but he kept coming back to check on her progress. At first, Beth thought he was just being polite, but then she realized he was genuinely curious about what she was doing. Find anything useful? He asked during one of his visits. Beth looked up from the laptop screen. Actually, yes. There's a program for small cattle ranchers that I think you'd qualify for. And another one for infrastructure improvements that could help with your fence repairs. Tommy sat down across from her. How much paperwork are we talking about? A lot, Beth said honestly. But I think it's worth it. Some of these programs could save you thousands of dollars. Over the next few days, Beth threw herself into the work. She organized the ranch's financial records, researched government programs, and even called some of the vendors to negotiate better payment terms. It felt good to be useful again, to have a purpose beyond just feeling sorry for herself. Tommy was amazed at how quickly Beth worked through problems that had been keeping him awake at night. She had a way of explaining complicated things in simple terms, and she never made him feel stupid for not understanding something. You're really good at this, he said one evening as they reviewed the applications she'd prepared. Beth felt herself blush. It's just what I'm used to doing. Numbers make sense to me. Well, they don't make sense to me, Tommy said. But watching you work with them is pretty impressive. Rosa, who had been quietly observing the changes in her grandson over the past few days, smiled to herself. Tommy hadn't looked this hopeful in months, and it wasn't just because of the financial help. Beth had brought something to their home that had been missing for a long time, the sense that things could get better. By the end of the week, Beth had submitted applications for 3 different programs and reorganized the ranch's entire filing system. She'd also negotiated payment plans for several overdue bills and found errors in some vendor contracts that had been costing the ranch money for months. I should probably call my family, Beth said one evening. They're probably worried sick. About me. Tommy looked up from the papers they'd been reviewing. Of course, use the phone in the kitchen. Call as long as you need to. But as Beth stood up to make the call, she realized something that surprised her. For the first time in years, she didn't want to go home. She'd found something here on this struggling ranch that she'd been missing in her old life, the feeling that she was needed, that her skills and talents mattered to someone. She made the call to her family, assuring them she was safe and explaining what had happened. But when they asked when she was coming home, she found herself saying, "I'm not sure yet. There are some people here who need my help." After she hung up, Tommy was waiting in the kitchen. Everything okay at home? Beth nodded. They're just glad I'm safe. Tommy, I was wondering if maybe I could stay a little longer. Just until we hear back about those applications. Tommy tried to hide his relief, but Beth could see it in his eyes. That would be great. I mean, if you want to, Rosa would love having you around longer. What about you? Beth asked. Would you like having me around longer? 3 weeks had passed since Beth first arrived at the ranch, and she was starting to feel like she belonged there. The guest room no longer felt like a temporary stop. It felt like home. She'd established routines like making coffee in the morning before anyone else woke up and helping Rosa with dinner preparations in the evening. The applications Beth had submitted were starting to pay off. They'd received approval for a small grant that would help with feed costs, and 2 other programs looked promising. But more importantly, Beth had found ways to save money that were already making a difference. I talked to Miller's feed store today, she told Tommy over breakfast. If we order in bulk and pay within 15 days, they'll give us a 12% discount. Tommy looked up from his eggs. 12%? That's more than I make in profit on some months. That's because you weren't buying smart, Beth said. Then immediately regretted how that sounded. I mean, you were doing the best you could with what you knew. Rosa chuckled from the stove. She's not wrong, Mio. Sometimes it takes fresh eyes to see what we've been missing. Tommy didn't look offended. Over the past few weeks, he'd come to appreciate Beth's direct way of speaking. She didn't sugarcoat things, but she also didn't make him feel stupid. She just told him what needed to be done. What else did you find? He asked. Beth pulled out a notebook where she'd been keeping track of all her discoveries. The veterinarian you've been using charges almost twice what the one in the next town charges. And that insurance policy you have on the equipment? I found the same coverage for 40% less. Tommy shook his head in amazement. How do you know all this stuff? I spent a lot of time helping small businesses back home, Beth explained. You'd be surprised how many people are paying too much for things just because they don't know there are better options. That afternoon, Tommy was in the barn fixing a broken stall door when he heard Beth calling his name. He walked outside to find her standing next to the fence, looking worried. What's wrong? He asked. I think there's something wrong with one of your cows, she said, pointing to a brown and white heifer that was standing apart from the others. She's been there for about an hour, and she keeps looking at her side. Tommy grabbed his hat, and they walked over to the fence together. He took one look at the cow, and his expression grew serious. That's Bessie, he said. She's one of our best mothers. Looks like she might be having trouble calving. Beth watched as Tommy climbed over the fence and slowly approached the cow. Bessie was clearly in distress, shifting her weight from one foot to the other and looking back at her flanks. What can we do? Beth asked. Call Doc Peterson, Tommy said. His number's on the refrigerator. Tell him we need him out here right away. Beth ran to the house and made the call, but when she came back, Tommy looked even more worried. He's dealing with an emergency on another ranch, she said. He can't get here for at least 2 hours. Tommy ran his hand through his hair. I don't think we have 2 hours. I'm going to have to try to help her myself. What do you need me to do? Beth asked without hesitation. Tommy looked at her in surprise. You don't have to help with this. It's not going to be pretty. I didn't ask if it was going to be pretty, Beth said firmly. I asked what you need me to do. For the next hour, Tommy worked to help Bessie deliver her calf. Beth stayed by his side, following his instructions and helping however she could. She didn't complain when she got dirty, and she didn't turn away when things got difficult. There, Tommy said finally, as a healthy calf slipped into the world. Come on, little one. Beth watched in amazement as the calf took its first breath and tried to stand on wobbly legs. Bessie immediately began cleaning her baby, and the relief on Tommy's face was clear. Is everything okay? Beth asked. Tommy nodded, wiping sweat from his forehead. They're both fine. That was touch and go for a while there. As they walked back to the house, Tommy was unusually quiet. Finally, he stopped and turned to Beth. Thank you, he said. Most people would have run away when things got messy like that. Beth shrugged. I'm not most people, I guess. No, Tommy said, looking at her with something new in his eyes. You're definitely not. That evening, Rosa was unusually quiet during dinner. She kept glancing between Tommy and Beth with a knowing smile, but she didn't say anything until they were cleaning up the dishes. You two work well together, she said casually. Tommy and Beth looked at each other, and Beth felt her cheeks grow warm. We're just helping each other out, Tommy said. Rosa laughed. Is that what you call it? In my day, we called it something else. The next morning brought unexpected news. Beth was checking her email on Rosa's laptop when she found a message from her old boss in Ohio. Tommy, she called out. Can you come here for a minute? Tommy walked into the kitchen, still wearing his work gloves. What's up? My old company wants me to come back, Beth said, staring at the screen. They're offering me a promotion and a raise. Tommy felt his heart sink, but he tried to keep his expression neutral. That's great news. When do they want you to start? As soon as possible, Beth said quietly. They said they'd even pay for my travel expenses to get back. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then Tommy pulled off his gloves and sat down across from her. You should take it, he said. It sounds like a good opportunity. Beth looked at him carefully. Is that what you want me to do? Tommy was quiet for a long moment. What I want and what's best for you might be two different things. What do you want? Beth asked. I want you to stay, Tommy said honestly. But I can't ask you to give up a good job to stay on a struggling ranch with people you barely know. Beth? Close the laptop. What if I told you that I've learned more about myself in the past month than I did in the past 5 years? What if I told you that I feel more useful and valued here than I ever did at my old job? Tommy looked at her in surprise. I'd say that you're probably just being kind. I'm not being kind, Beth said. I'm being honest. Back home, I was just another face in the office. Here, I feel like I'm actually making a difference. Before Tommy could respond, Rosa appeared in the doorway. Are you two going to keep talking, or are you going to do something about that storm that's coming? They looked outside to see dark clouds gathering on the horizon. The wind was picking up, and the horses in the pasture were becoming restless. How bad is it going to be? Beth asked. Tommy was already reaching for his weather radio. Could be pretty bad. We need to get the animals secured and make sure everything's tied down. For the next 2 hours, they worked together to prepare for the storm. Beth helped Tommy move the horses into the barn, secure loose equipment, and check that all the windows in the house were properly latched. As the first drops of rain began to fall, they stood on the porch watching the storm approach. The wind was getting stronger, and lightning was beginning to flash in the distance. I've never seen a storm like this, Beth said. They can be pretty intense out here, Tommy said. But this house has weathered worse. The storm hit with full force just after sunset. Rain pounded against the windows, and the wind howled around the house. The power went out around 9 o'clock, and they gathered in the living room with candles and flashlights. At least we have plenty of firewood, Rosa said, adding another log to the fireplace. But around midnight, they heard a sound that made Tommy's blood run cold, a loud crack followed by a crash. That sounded like it came from the barn, he said, grabbing a flashlight. You're not going out there, Rosa said firmly. It's too dangerous. But Tommy was already putting on his rain jacket. I have to check on the animals. Then I'm coming. With you, Beth said, reaching for her coat. Absolutely not, Tommy said. You could get hurt. So could you, Beth replied. And you're going to need help if something's wrong. They made their way to the barn, fighting against the wind and rain. When they got there, they found that a large tree branch had crashed through part of the roof and water was pouring in. We need to move the animals to the other side of the barn, Tommy shouted over the storm. Working together, they managed to relocate all the horses and cattle to the dry section of the barn. It was exhausting work, and they were both soaked to the skin by the time they finished. As they stood in the barn, catching their breath, Beth realized something important. She'd never felt more alive than she did at that moment, working alongside Tommy to protect something they both cared about. The job offer, she said suddenly. Tommy looked at her. What about it? I'm not taking it, Beth said. I'm staying here. Beth, you can't make that decision because of one storm, Tommy said. I'm not making it because of the storm, Beth said. I'm making it because this is where I belong. This is where I want to be. Tommy stared at her for a long moment, rain dripping from his hair. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Beth said. And as the storm raged around them, Tommy realized that maybe, just maybe, the best things in life really did come when you least expected them. The morning after the storm brought bright sunshine and a mess that would take days to clean up. Beth woke up early and walked outside to survey the damage. Tree branches were scattered across the yard, the barn roof had a gaping hole, and the vegetable garden Rosa had worked so hard on was completely destroyed. Tommy was already outside, standing next to his truck and staring at a large tree that had fallen across the driveway. His shoulders were slumped, and Beth could see the weight of everything pressing down on him. How bad is it? She asked, walking up beside him. Tommy shook his head. Bad enough. The insurance might cover some of it, but not everything. And we can't afford to fix all this right now. Beth looked around at the damage. What's the most important thing to fix first? The barn roof, Tommy said without hesitation. We can't leave the animals exposed if another storm comes through. Okay, Beth said simply. Then that's what we'll do. Tommy turned to look at her. We? Beth, this isn't your problem to solve. Yes, it is, she said firmly. This is my home now too, remember? I told you I was staying. Over the next few days, Beth threw herself into helping with the storm cleanup. She researched contractors, called insurance companies, and even climbed up on the barn roof to help Tommy patch the worst of the holes with tarps. You don't have to do this, Tommy said as they worked together to nail down a piece of plywood. Stop telling me what I don't have to do, Beth said, hammering in another nail. I know what I have to do, and I know what I want to do. Right now, they're the same thing. Rosa watched from the porch, smiling to herself. She'd seen the way her grandson looked at Beth when he thought no one was watching. She'd also seen the way Beth's face lit up whenever Tommy walked into a room. These two were falling in love, even if they were too stubborn to admit it, a week. Later, Beth was in the kitchen working on the ranch's books when she made a discovery that changed everything. She'd been going through old files, trying to organize the paperwork for the insurance claim when she found a folder marked County. Fair minus 1,987. Inside were ribbons, certificates, and photos of Tommy's grandfather showing prize-winning cattle. But what caught her attention was a newspaper clipping about the county fair's cattle competition. Tommy, she called out. Can you come here for a minute? Tommy walked into the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. What's up? Did you know your grandfather won the county fair cattle competition 5 years in a row? Beth asked, holding up the newspaper clipping. Tommy glanced at the article. Yeah, he used to tell stories about that. But that was a long time ago. The fair is in 3 weeks, Beth said, pulling up the county fair website on the laptop. And they still have the cattle competition. Tommy sat down across from her. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that prize pool of yours, Thunder, is pretty impressive, Beth said. And I'm thinking that the first place prize is $5,000. Tommy was quiet for a moment. Beth, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but entering costs money we don't have. Plus, Thunder would need to be in perfect condition, and I'd need a proper trailer to transport him. How much does it cost to enter? Beth asked. $200? Tommy said. Plus feed, grooming supplies, and all the other stuff. Beth was already making notes. What about transportation? My neighbor Jake has a cattle trailer I might be able to borrow, Tommy said slowly. But Beth, this is a long shot. There will be ranchers there with a lot more money and experience than we have. So, Beth said, your grandfather didn't let that stop him. That evening, Beth approached Rosa while they were doing the dishes. What do you think about Tommy entering Thunder in the county fair? Rosa dried a plate carefully before answering. I think Tommy's grandfather would be proud to see his grandson carrying on the tradition. But what about the risk? Beth asked. The entry fee is money we really need right now? Rosa looked at her thoughtfully. Mia, sometimes you have to take risks to get anywhere in life. The biggest risk is not taking any risks at all. Over the next few days, Beth worked on convincing Tommy to enter the competition. She researched the other competitors, studied the judging criteria, and even found videos of previous competitions online. Look at this, she said, showing Tommy her laptop screen. Last year's winner was a good bull, but Thunder is just as good. Maybe better. Tommy watched the video of the previous year's competition. I don't know, Beth. That's some serious competition. You're serious competition too, Beth said. You just don't know it yet. Finally, Tommy agreed to enter Thunder in the competition. Beth immediately got to work, organizing everything they'd need. She scheduled a visit from the veterinarian to make sure Thunder was in perfect health, ordered special feed to give his coat extra shine, and even found a used grooming kit at a reasonable price. I can't believe I'm doing this, Tommy said as they watched Thunder in the pasture. I can, Beth said. You're doing it because you're brave, and because you care about this ranch and your family's legacy. The week before the fair, Beth suggested they practice showing Thunder. Tommy looked at her like she was crazy. Practice showing him? Beth, I've been working with cattle my whole life. Yes, but have you ever shown cattle in a competition? Beth asked. Because I've been watching videos, and it's different from just working with them. Tommy had to admit she was right. Showing cattle in a competition required different skills than just herding them or caring for them. So they spent several evenings in the pasture, with Beth calling out instructions she'd learned from watching competition videos online. "Keep him moving," Beth called out. "The judges need to see how he walks." "I feel ridiculous," Tommy said. But he was smiling. "You look good," Beth said. "Professional." The night before the fair, Beth was too nervous to sleep. She kept thinking about all the things that could go wrong. What if Thunder didn't perform well? What if they'd made a mistake? Entering him? What if she'd convinced Tommy to waste money they couldn't afford to lose? She was sitting on the porch steps, staring up at the stars when Tommy came outside. "Can't sleep either?" he asked, sitting down beside her. "I keep thinking about tomorrow," Beth said. What if this was a bad idea? Tommy was quiet for a moment. "You know what I keep thinking about?" "What?" "I keep thinking about how different my life is now compared to 2 months ago," Tommy said. 2 months ago, I was ready to give up on this ranch. I was ready to sell it and find some other way to make a living. Beth turned to look at him. "What changed?" "You changed," Tommy said simply. "You showed me that this place was worth fighting. You helped me see possibilities I'd never considered. Even if we don't win tomorrow, entering this competition means something. It means we're not giving up." Beth felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Tommy, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I've never felt like I belonged anywhere until I came here," she said. "Back home, I was just going through the motions. I had a job, an apartment, a routine, but I didn't have a purpose. Here I feel like everything I do matters." Tommy reached over and took her hand. "It does matter. You matter. To me, to Rosa, to this ranch. You've made all the difference in the world." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, holding hands and looking up at the stars. Finally, Tommy spoke again. "Beth, I need to tell you something too." "What?" "I'm falling in love with you," he said quietly. "I know that might complicate things, and I know you might not feel the same way, but I had to say it." Beth turned to face him fully. "Tommy, I fell in love with you weeks ago. I just didn't know how to tell you." "Really?" Tommy asked, his voice full of hope. "Really," Beth said, squeezing his hand. "I love your kindness, your determination, the way you care about your family and this land. I love that you took a chance on a stranger at a bus station. I love that you see the good in everything, even when things look hopeless." Tommy leaned closer to her. "Can I kiss you?" "I was wondering when you were going to ask," Beth said, smiling. Their first kiss was gentle and sweet, full of all the feelings they'd been holding back. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "So what happens now?" Beth asked. "Now, we go win that competition," Tommy said. "And then we figure out the rest of our lives together." "Together," Beth repeated, liking the sound of that word. "Together," Tommy confirmed, and kissed her again under the Texas stars. The morning of the county fair dawned bright and clear, with just enough of a breeze to keep the temperature comfortable. Beth woke up before sunrise, her stomach full of butterflies. Today was the day that would determine whether their gamble on Thunder would pay off. Tommy was already in the barn, giving Thunder one final grooming. The bull looked magnificent. His coat was shining. His stance was proud, and he seemed to sense that today was special. "How's he looking?" Beth asked, walking into the barn with 2 cups of coffee. "Like a champion," Tommy said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "I just hope the judges see what we see." Rosa appeared in the barn doorway, carrying a small cooler. "I'd packed some sandwiches and snacks for today. You two will be too nervous to remember to eat otherwise." "Thanks, Abuela," Tommy said, giving his grandmother a hug. "I wish you were coming with us. These old bones don't do well at crowded fairs." "Anymore," Rosa said. "But I'll be here when you get back, win or lose." Loading Thunder into the borrowed trailer took some patience, but eventually they were on the road to the fairgrounds. Beth sat in the passenger seat, going over her notes one more time. "Are you more nervous than I am?" Tommy asked, glancing at her. "Probably," Beth admitted. "I keep thinking about all the things that could go wrong." "Like what?" "Like Thunder could get spooked by all the noise and people. Or you could forget everything we practiced. Or the judges could just prefer a different type of bull." Tommy reached over and squeezed her hand. Or we could win. The fairgrounds were already bustling with activity when they arrived. Cattle trailers were lined up in the showing area, and Beth could see some truly impressive animals being unloaded. Her confidence wavered when she saw the competition. "Look at that one," she whispered to Tommy, nodding toward a massive black bull being led by a man in an expensive-looking cowboy hat. "That's Big Jim Morrison," Tommy said. "He's won this competition 3 years running." Beth felt her heart sink. Maybe this was a mistake. "Hey," Tommy said, stopping to face her. "Remember what you told me about taking risks?" "We're here now. Thunder's ready. I'm ready. The only question is, are you ready?" Beth looked at Tommy's determined face and felt her courage return. "Yes, I'm ready." They found their assigned stall and got Thunder settled in. The competition wouldn't start for another 2 hours, but Beth wanted to scout out the other entries and watch how the experienced competitors prepared their animals. "Everyone looks so professional," she said, watching a family work together to prepare their bull. "So do we," Tommy said. "You've made sure of that." As they walked around the showing area, Beth noticed something interesting. While the other competitors had fancy equipment and expensive-looking gear, none of them seemed to have the quiet confidence that Tommy displayed with Thunder. He moved around the bull with an easy grace that came from years of working with cattle. "Not just showing them, you know what?" Beth said, "I think we actually have a chance." The competition began with the younger animals, and Beth and Tommy watched carefully to understand how the judging worked. The judges looked at the animals' conformation, movement, and overall presence. They also paid attention to how well the handlers worked with their animals. "Look at how that judge is watching the handler as much as the animal," Beth pointed out. "That makes sense," Tommy said. "A good stockman should make his animal look its best." When it was finally time for Thunder's category, Beth felt like her heart might beat right out of her chest. Tommy led Thunder into the showing ring, and Beth found a spot along the fence where she could watch. Thunder looked amazing under the bright lights of the show ring. His coat gleamed, his head was held high, and he moved with the powerful grace of a true champion. But what impressed Beth most was watching Tommy work with him. All those evenings of practice had paid off. Tommy looked like he belonged in that ring. The competition was tough. Big Jim Morrison's bull was indeed impressive, and there were several other animals that looked like serious contenders. But as the judging continued, Beth noticed that the judges kept coming back to look at Thunder. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice crackled over the loudspeaker, "the judges have made their decision." Beth held her breath as the announcer called out the winners in reverse order. Third place went to a beautiful red bull from a ranch 2 counties over. Second place went to another impressive animal that Beth had been worried about. "And our first place winner," the announcer said, "representing the Martinez Ranch is Thunder, shown by Tommy Martinez." Beth screamed so loudly that people around her started laughing. She vaulted over the fence and ran into the ring, where Tommy was standing with Thunder, holding a blue ribbon and looking stunned. "We won!" Beth shouted, throwing her arms around Tommy. "I can't believe it," Tommy said, hugging her back. "We actually won." The prize ceremony was a blur of handshakes, photos, and congratulations from other competitors. Big Jim Morrison himself came over to shake Tommy's hand. "That's a fine bull you've got there," he said. "Your grandfather would be proud?" "You knew my grandfather?" Tommy asked. "Knew him? I used to compete against him back in the day. He was tough competition then, and I can see it runs in the family." The drive home was filled with excited chatter about the day's events. The $5,000 prize check was folded carefully in Beth's purse, and the blue ribbon hung from the truck's rearview mirror. "I still can't believe we won," Tommy said for the 10th time. "I can," Beth said. "Thunder's a champion, and so are you." When they pulled into the ranch driveway, Rosa was waiting on the porch. The moment she saw the blue ribbon in the truck window, she started clapping and cheering. "I knew it," she called out. "I just knew you two would do it." That evening they celebrated with a special dinner that Rosa had prepared. The dining room table was set with her best dishes, and she'd even opened a bottle of wine that had been saving for a special occasion. "This calls for a toast," Rosa said, raising her glass. To thunder, to hard work, and to taking chances on strangers at bus stations. They clinked glasses and laughed, but then Tommy stood up. I have something else to celebrate, he said. Reaching into his pocket, Beth's heart stopped when she saw what he pulled out, a simple gold ring that had clearly been in the family for generations. This was my grandmother's ring, Tommy said, his voice shaking slightly. And her grandmother's before that. Beth, I know we haven't known each other very long, but I can't imagine my life without you anymore. Will you marry me? Beth looked at the ring, then at Tommy's hopeful face, then at Rosa, who was trying not to cry. Yes, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, of course I'll marry you. Tommy slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Rosa immediately burst into tears and started hugging both of them. I'm going to plan the most beautiful wedding, Rosa said. Right here on the ranch, under the oak tree where Tommy's grandparents were married. That sounds perfect, Beth said, admiring the ring on her finger. 6 months later, that's exactly what happened. Beth wore a simple but elegant dress that she'd found in town, and Tommy wore his best boots and a new shirt. The oak tree was decorated with flowers from Rosa's garden, and half the county came to celebrate with them, as they exchanged vows under the same tree where 3 generations of Martinez family members had been married. Beth thought about how different her life had become. Since that day at the bus station, she'd been lost, alone, and without direction. Now she had a husband who loved her, a grandmother-in-law who treated her like family, and a ranch that was thriving thanks to their combined efforts. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been at that bus station that day? She asked Tommy as they danced their first dance as husband and wife. Never, Tommy said, spinning her around. Because I believe some things are meant to be. You were meant to be on that bus. I was meant to be at that station. And we were meant to find each other. Beth looked around at all the smiling faces of their friends and neighbors, at Rosa, who was crying happy tears at the ranch that was now truly home. You know what the best part is? She said. What's that? This is just the beginning, Beth said. We have our whole lives ahead of us. Tommy kissed her as the sun set over the ranch, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. In the distance, Thunder grazed peacefully in the pasture, his blue ribbon displayed proudly in the barn. It had been a long journey from that dusty bus station to this perfect moment, but every step had been worth it. Sometimes the best things in life really do come when you least expect them, and sometimes taking a chance on a stranger can change everything. As the music played and their friends celebrated around them, Tommy and Beth knew they had found something precious, not just love, but a true partnership that would last a lifetime. The ranch was saved, their future was bright, and they had each other, and that was more than enough.